Sophia was 9 years old when she was sold. She had lived in the Santa Clara orphanage for 3 years, ever since the car accident that killed her parents on a rainy highway outside the city. With no known relatives and no one to ask about her, Sophia became just another number in the overcrowded system of forgotten children. The orphanage stood like a gray fortress on the outskirts of town, housing 80 children in a building designed for 40. Director Carmela Torres ran the place with an iron fist and a smile that never reached her eyes. The children learned quickly not to ask questions, not to complain, and especially not to wonder why some of them disappeared in the middle of the night. Sophia had seen it happen before. Anna, who was 12 and dreamed of becoming a teacher, vanished one Tuesday morning. The director said she had been adopted by a loving family. But Sophia had heard the transaction through the thin walls of the director's office the night before. Money changing hands. Documents being signed. A man's rough voice saying, "She'll work well in the fields." Then there was little Miguel, only 7 years old, who disappeared on a Sunday. The director announced a special placement with a family who needed help on their farm. But the other children whispered darker truths late at night when the caretakers couldn't hear them. They spoke of children who were never seen again, of buyers who came in the dark, of destinations that had nothing to do with loving families or honest work. Sophia tried not to think about these things. She kept her head down, did her chores without complaint, and made herself as invisible as possible. In the orphanage, invisibility was survival. But invisibility only worked until someone decided to notice you. It was a Thursday evening when Director Torres called Sophia into her office. The room smelled of cheap perfume and cigarette smoke. Behind a heavy wooden desk sat the director, and beside her stood a thin man in an expensive suit who studied Sophia with cold, calculating eyes. "Sophia, this is Mr. Vargas," the director said with her rehearsed smile. "He represents a very generous family who are looking for a responsible young girl to help with light housework. They have a beautiful farm, plenty of food, and they're willing to provide you with education and a real future." Sophia felt her stomach drop. She had heard these exact words before, spoken to other children who later disappeared. "I don't want to go," she whispered. The director's smile vanished. "This is not a request, child. You're going with Mr. Vargas tonight. Go pack your things." Sophia's hands trembled as she walked back to the dormitory. The other girls watched her with silent, knowing eyes. They had seen this scene play out too many times before. She packed her few belongings into a worn canvas bag. 2 sets of clothes. A photograph of her parents. A small wooden bird her father had carved for her 6th birthday. Everything she owned in the world fit into a bag she could carry with one hand. As night fell, Mr. Vargas returned with 2 other men. They were large, rough-looking men who said nothing but watched Sophia with expressions that made her skin crawl. One of them carried thick rope and metal restraints that he didn't bother to hide. "Is that really necessary?" Director Torres asked, glancing at the restraints. "You said this one was clever," Mr. Vargas replied coldly. "We don't take chances with clever ones." Sophia tried to run. She made it as far as the hallway before rough hands grabbed her. She screamed, but a cloth was stuffed into her mouth. Her wrists were bound behind her back. She kicked and thrashed, but she was a 9-year-old girl against 3 grown men. Within minutes, she was being carried out the back entrance of the orphanage and thrown into a black carriage waiting in the shadows. The last thing she saw was Director Torres counting money by lamplight, not even bothering to watch as Sophia was taken away. Inside the carriage, it was completely dark. Sophia's wrists burned where the rope cut into her skin. The gag in her mouth made it hard to breathe. She was wedged between wooden crates that smelled of mold and something else, something chemical that made her eyes water. The carriage began to move, wheels creaking over rough roads. Through a crack in the wooden panels, Sophia could see they were heading away from the city, toward the mountains where thick forests stretched for miles without villages or roads. She had no idea where they were taking her, but every instinct screamed that she would never come back. The men spoke in low voices. "How much did we pay for this one?" one of them asked. 300 pesos, Mr. Vargas replied. "But she'll earn us 10 times that. Young ones like her are worth more in the border towns." Sophia's blood turned to ice. She understood now. She wasn't being taken to a farm. She was being trafficked, sold like cargo to buyers who would use her in ways she didn't want to imagine. Tears streamed down her face, but the gag muffled her sobs. The carriage climbed higher into the mountains, the road becoming rougher and narrower. Rain began to fall, first as a light drizzle, then as a torrential downpour that hammered against the carriage roof. Thunder cracked across the sky. The horses whinnied nervously, and the driver shouted commands to keep them moving forward. That was when Sophia heard it. A sound like the world splitting open. A deafening crack of wood and a roar of wind and water. Then impact. The entire carriage lurched violently to the side as something massive crashed down onto it from above. Wood splintered. Metal bent. The men shouted in panic. A giant tree, weakened by decades of disease and rot, had been torn from the earth by the storm and fallen directly across the road, crushing the front half of the carriage. The horses broke free and bolted into the darkness. The driver was thrown from his seat and lay motionless on the muddy ground. Inside the carriage, chaos erupted. One of the crates broke open, spilling its contents across the floor. The rear door of the carriage had been torn partially off its hinges, hanging at an angle. Sophia didn't hesitate. With her hands still bound behind her back, she threw herself toward the broken door. She hit it with her shoulder and the damaged wood gave way completely. She tumbled out into the rain and mud. "The girl?" Mr. Vargas shouted. "Don't let her escape." But Sophia was already running. She ran blindly into the forest, her bare feet slipping on wet leaves and sharp stones. Rain poured down in sheets, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Behind her, she heard the men cursing and crashing through the undergrowth. "She can't have gone far," one of them yelled. "Spread out and find her." Sophia's lungs burned. Her wrists were still bound, making it impossible to balance properly. She fell repeatedly, scraping her knees and elbows on rocks and roots. But she kept running. She had no plan, no destination, only the desperate knowledge that being caught meant a fate worse than death. The forest grew thicker and darker. The sounds of pursuit seemed to come from every direction. Flashlight beams cut through the rain, sweeping back and forth as the men searched. Sophia pressed herself against a massive tree trunk, trying to control her ragged breathing. A beam of light passed within inches of her hiding spot. "I saw movement over there," one of the men shouted. Sophia ran again. She plunged deeper into the forest, her strength fading with every step. Her vision blurred from exhaustion and terror. That was when she saw it. Even in the darkness and rain, the tree was impossible to miss. It was enormous, far larger than any of the living trees around it. But it was dead, had been dead for decades. The massive trunk had fallen long ago, lying across the forest floor like the corpse of some ancient giant. Most of the bark had rotted away, leaving smooth, weathered wood covered in moss and creeping vines. But what caught Sophia's attention was the opening. Near the base of the fallen trunk, partially hidden by undergrowth, there was a dark hollow where the wood had rotted away completely. It was large enough for a child to crawl through. Sophia dropped to her knees and squeezed through the opening, dragging her bound hands painfully through the narrow space. Inside, the hollow trunk opened into a larger cavity. It was completely dark, but the air was dry and smelled of old wood and earth. Sophia pressed herself into the farthest corner of the hollow, finally allowing herself to collapse. Her whole body shook with exhaustion and fear. For the first time since being thrown into the carriage, she allowed herself to cry. She cried for her parents, who had died and left her alone in a world that treated children like merchandise. She cried for the other children who had disappeared from the orphanage, who had probably suffered the same fate she had barely escaped. She cried because she was 9 years old, alone in a dark forest, with men hunting her like an animal. But as her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she began to notice something strange. The interior of the hollow trunk was not empty. There were objects here. Carefully placed objects. Sophia's heart pounded as she strained to see in the dim light filtering through cracks in the wood. There were folded blankets, dry and clean despite the age of the tree. There were tin cans sealed and stacked neatly against one wall. There were candles and matches stored in a waterproof container. And there was a metal box, rusted but intact, sitting in the center of the hollow like it had been waiting for someone to find it. Someone had prepared this place. Someone had turned this dead tree into a refuge. Outside, she could hear the men's voices growing closer. "She has to be around here somewhere. Check every tree, every rock. We're not leaving without her." Sophia held her breath, not daring to move. The voices circled the area, flashlight beams sweeping across the forest floor. But none of the men thought to check inside the fallen dead tree. Why would they? It looked like nothing more than a rotting log, indistinguishable from dozens of others in the forest. After what felt like hours, the voices began to fade. "We'll set up camp and search again at first light," Mr. Vargas said. "A 9-year-old girl can't survive out here alone. She'll either come crawling back or we'll find her body in the morning." Sophia waited in absolute silence until she could no longer hear any sounds of the men. Only then did she dare to move. With her hands still bound, she awkwardly opened the metal box using her teeth and bound wrists. Inside was a letter, sealed in plastic to protect it from moisture. The envelope was addressed in careful handwriting. To whoever runs and finds this place. Sophia's hands trembled as she managed to tear open the envelope. Inside was a letter written in Spanish, the ink faded but still legible. She read it by the dim light filtering through the cracks in the wood. My name is Elena Ruiz. If you are reading this, it means you are running from something terrible just as I once did. I was 10 years old when I was sold by the woman who ran the orphanage where I lived. 3 men bought me and took me away in a carriage, promising I would work on a farm. But I knew the truth. I had seen other girls disappear before me. I knew what happened to children like us. On the road through these mountains, a miracle happened. A storm brought down a tree across our path. In the chaos I escaped. I ran into this forest with men chasing me, certain I would die. But I found this tree. This hollow, dry space inside a dead giant. I hid here for 3 days while the men searched for me. They never found me. When they finally gave up and left, I was alone, terrified, and had no idea what to do. But I survived. I found a village on the other side of the forest. I found people who helped me. I found a new life. It took me 20 years, but I built something good from the ashes of that terrible night. And 10 years ago, I returned to this forest to find the tree that saved my life. I prepared it for the next girl who would need it. I have left supplies, food, blankets, and most importantly, a map. The map will show you a safe path through the forest to the village of San Miguel, where you will find the Socorro family. They know about this place. They know to expect children who are running. They will help you just as I was helped. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. And you will survive this. Trust the map. Trust your strength. And when you are safe, remember to help the next child who runs. With hope for your future, Elena Ruiz, March 1998. Sophia read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. But this time they were not only tears of fear. They were tears of something she had not felt in years. Hope. She searched the metal box and found the map Elena had mentioned, sealed in plastic and perfectly preserved. It showed the forest in detail, with a marked path leading from the fallen tree to a village several kilometers away. There were notes written along the route. Fresh water stream here. Steep slope, go slowly. Cave shelter if you need to rest. Elena had thought of everything. But Sophia also understood the danger. The men were camped somewhere nearby. If she tried to leave now in the darkness, she would make noise and they would hear her. She had to wait until morning when the men would be moving and searching in other areas. She had to be patient. Sophia managed to cut through the rope binding her wrists using a sharp edge of the metal box. The relief was immediate, though her wrists were raw and bleeding. She wrapped them carefully with strips of cloth she tore from one of the blankets. Then she opened one of the tin cans. Inside were preserved peaches and syrup, still perfectly edible despite being years old. She ate slowly, savoring every bite. It was the first food she had eaten since breakfast at the orphanage a lifetime ago. As she ate, she explored the rest of the hollow. There were other things Elena had left behind. A small knife. A canteen for water. A change of clothes that were too big for Sophia but could be made to work. Matches and a small oil lamp. And something else. Carved into the inner wall of the hollow were names. Dozens of names, etched carefully into the wood. Elena Ruiz, 1988 Lucia M. 1992 Ana Sofia, 1995 Carmen, 1998 Isabella, 2001 Rosa, 2003 Martina, 2007. Sophia's breath caught. She was not the first child to find this place. Elena had saved herself, then spent years maintaining this refuge for others who would need it. And each girl who survived had left her name behind, a testament to the fact that escape was possible, that survival was real. With a trembling hand, Sophia used the small knife to carefully carve her own name beneath the others. Sophia, 2011. She was part of something now. A legacy of survivors. Girls who refused to disappear silently. As night deepened, Sophia wrapped herself in the blankets and tried to rest. Outside, the rain continued to fall, and somewhere in the darkness, dangerous men slept by their campfire, planning to resume their search at dawn. But inside the hollow tree, Sophia felt something she had not felt since her parents died. She felt protected. Not by walls or locks or adults who promised safety they could not deliver. But by the invisible thread connecting her to every girl who had hidden in this same place, who had read the same letter, who had carved her name into the same wood. They had all survived. And so would she. Sophia slept fitfully, waking every few hours to the sounds of the forest. Owls hooting. Small animals moving through the undergrowth. The distant murmur of the stream Elena had marked on the map. And once, terrifyingly close, the sound of footsteps. She held her breath as someone walked past the fallen tree, so close she could hear him muttering to himself. "Stupid girl probably died of exposure already," the man grumbled. "Waste of time looking for a corpse." The footsteps moved away. Sophia waited, counting her heartbeats until she was certain he was gone. Dawn came slowly, gray light filtering through the cracks in the wood. Sophia carefully packed everything she would need. The map, the knife, the canteen which she would fill at the stream, the change of clothes, matches, 2 cans of food. She folded Elena's letter and tucked it carefully into her pocket. Then she crawled to the opening and listened. The forest was quiet except for birdsong. She could smell smoke from a campfire, but it was distant, probably a kilometer or more away. The men were searching in the wrong direction. This was her chance. Sophia squeezed through the opening and emerged into the cool morning air. Her body ached from sleeping on the hard wood, and her wrists throbbed where the rope had cut into them. But she was alive. And she was free. Following Elena's map, she moved carefully through the forest, staying low and quiet. The first landmark was the stream. She found it exactly where the map indicated, a clear ribbon of water flowing over smooth stones. She filled the canteen and drank deeply, the cold water shocking her system awake. As she knelt by the stream, she heard voices again. Closer this time. "Check the western ridge," Mr. Vargas was saying. She couldn't have made it far with her hands tied. Sophia's heart raced. They were moving in her direction. She looked at the map. There was a notation: if pursued, follow stream south to cave shelter. Hidden entrance behind waterfall. Sophia waded into the stream and began moving south, letting the flowing water hide her footprints. The cold numbed her feet, but she ignored the discomfort. Survival meant embracing pain. After 20 minutes of walking through the stream, she heard it. The sound of falling water. The waterfall was small, barely taller than a grown man, but behind it was exactly what Elena had promised. A narrow opening in the rock face, completely hidden by the curtain of falling water. Sophia pushed through the waterfall, gasping at the shock of cold water, and stumbled into a small cave. It was dry and dark and safe. She pressed herself into the deepest corner and waited. Within minutes, she heard the men arrive at the stream. "Fresh tracks," one of them said. "She came this way." "Check both directions," Mr. Vargas ordered. Sophia held her breath. The men searched for over an hour, walking up and down the stream, examining the banks for any sign of where she had left the water. But they never thought to check behind the waterfall. Why would they? It looked like solid rock. Finally, frustrated and cold, the men moved on. "We're wasting time," one of them said. "The girl is probably miles away by now or dead. Either way, she's not worth the trouble." "The boss won't be happy," Mr. Vargas replied. "We paid good money for that one. Then the boss can come search for her himself. I'm done freezing in this forest." Their voices faded as they walked back the way they had come. Sophia waited another hour before emerging from the cave. The forest was silent. She consulted the map again. The next landmark was a steep slope marked with the warning, "Go slowly. Loose rocks." She found it within an hour. The slope was treacherous, covered in wet leaves and unstable stones that shifted under her weight. She descended carefully, testing each step before putting her full weight down. Halfway down, her foot slipped. She fell hard, sliding several meters before managing to grab onto a tree root. Pain shot through her ankle, sharp and immediate. She had twisted it badly. Tears of frustration burned her eyes, but she forced herself to stand. She could not stop now. Using a fallen branch as a makeshift crutch, she continued down the slope, gritting her teeth against the pain. At the bottom, she rested beside a large boulder, examining her ankle. It was swollen and already turning purple, but she could still put weight on it if she was careful. Not broken then. Just badly sprained. She wrapped it tightly with strips torn from the extra clothes, creating a crude but functional support. According to the map, she was now halfway to the village. But with an injured ankle, the remaining journey would take much longer. She rationed her food carefully, eating only enough to keep her strength up. 1 can of peaches would have to last the entire day. As afternoon turned to evening, Sophia began to feel the full weight of her exhaustion. She had not truly slept in 2 days. Her body was covered in cuts and bruises. Her ankle throbbed with every step. But the map showed one more shelter before the village. An abandoned woodcutter's cabin marked with the note, "Safe to rest." Hidden from main path. She found it just as darkness fell. The cabin was small and weathered, barely more than 4 walls and a partially collapsed roof. But it was dry and it had a door that could be barred from inside. Sophia barred the door, wrapped herself in the blanket from Elena's tree, and finally allowed herself to truly sleep. She dreamed of her parents. Her father carving the little wooden bird. Her mother singing while she cooked. Simple memories from before the world became cruel. She woke to sunlight streaming through the gaps in the cabin walls. Her ankle was even more swollen, but the rest had helped. She could walk, slowly and painfully, but she could walk. According to the map, the village of San Miguel was only 3 kilometers away. She could make it. Sophia stepped out of the cabin and began the final leg of her journey. The forest gradually thinned, giving way to cultivated fields and dirt roads. In the distance she could see smoke rising from chimneys. The village. She was almost there. But as she walked down the main road leading into San Miguel, she became aware of how she must look. Filthy, bleeding, limping, dressed in torn and muddy clothes several sizes too large. She looked exactly like what she was, a child who had run for her life. People stared as she walked through the village square. A woman gasped and clutched her child closer. A man stepped forward, concerned. "Are you all right, little one? Are you lost?" Sophia's voice was hoarse from disuse. "I'm looking for the Socorro family." The man's expression changed immediately. Understanding flooded his eyes. "You found the tree," he said softly. Sophia nodded. "Come with me," the man said gently. "You're safe now." He led her through winding streets to a modest house with a bright blue door. Before he could knock, the door opened. An older woman stood there, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes kind and knowing. "Another one," she said quietly. "Elena's tree continues its work." The woman, Señora Maria Socorro, welcomed Sophia inside. The house was warm and filled with the smell of cooking food. "My husband and I have been waiting," Maria explained as she guided Sophia to a chair. "Elena visits us every few months to maintain the tree and the shelters. She told us there might be another child soon. The trafficking networks have been active again." Maria cleaned Sophia's wounds, wrapped her ankle properly, and gave her clean clothes and hot soup. "You'll stay with us as long as you need," she said. "We have a room prepared. We'll contact the authorities we trust, the ones who actually help children instead of returning them to the people who hurt them." Sophia ate the soup slowly, still not quite believing she was safe. "How many?" she asked. "How many girls has Elena saved?" Maria smiled sadly. 16 that we know of. Probably more who found the tree, used the supplies and moved on without leaving their names. What happened to them? Some were adopted by good families. Some, when they were old enough, chose to live independently with our help. A few, like Elena, dedicated their lives to helping others who had suffered the same way. Maria paused. "And you, Sophia? What do you want?" For the first time in 3 years, someone was asking Sophia what she wanted. Not telling her what to do. Not deciding her fate. Asking. "I want to make sure no other girl has to run through the forest like I did," Sophia said quietly. "I want to help." Maria nodded. "Then you will. When you're ready. But first you heal." Over the following weeks, Sophia did heal. Her ankle mended. Her cuts became scars. The Socorro family treated her not as a charity case but as a daughter. And when Elena Ruiz finally visited the village, Sophia met the woman who had saved her life without ever knowing her name. Elena was now 43 years old, a successful lawyer who specialized in children's rights. She had dedicated her entire adult life to fighting the systems that had once tried to destroy her. When Elena saw Sophia's name carved into the tree alongside all the others, she wept. "You survived," she said, embracing the girl. "You are so strong." "I survived because of you," Sophia replied. "Because you came back. Because you prepared the tree." Elena smiled. "And one day you'll prepare something for the next girl who runs. That's how we break the cycle. One survivor helping the next." 3 months later, with the help of Elena's legal expertise and the testimony of Sophia and other rescued children, the entire trafficking network was exposed. Director Carmela Torres and Mr. Vargas were arrested. Dozens of children were rescued from farms and factories where they had been enslaved. The Santa Clara orphanage was shut down permanently. And Sophia, now living permanently with the Socorro family, began her own journey toward becoming an advocate for children's rights. She was 10 years old when she gave her first testimony in court, speaking calmly and clearly about everything she had witnessed and experienced. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened carefully to every word. When Sophia finished, the courtroom was completely silent. "Young lady," the judge said quietly, "you are one of the bravest people I have ever met." Sophia shook her head. "I'm not brave, Your Honor. I was just lucky enough to find the tree that Elena prepared." The brave ones are the girls who didn't find it, who are still running, who are still hiding. Then we will find them, the judge promised. Because of you we will find them. Years passed. Sophia grew up in the Socorro household, surrounded by love and support. She excelled in school. She became fluent in legal language and advocacy work. And every year, on the anniversary of her escape, she returned to the forest to maintain the tree. She replaced old supplies with fresh ones. She updated the map with new safe routes. She carved the names of newly rescued girls into the wood. The hollow tree became legendary in the network of people who fought child trafficking. Social workers whispered about it. Rescued children drew strength from knowing it existed. And Elena's original letter remained, protected in plastic, waiting for the next terrified child who would crawl into the darkness and find hope. When Sophia turned 18, she enrolled in law school. She wanted to follow in Elena's footsteps, to use legal tools to dismantle the systems that preyed on vulnerable children. But she also did something else. She bought the land where the dead tree lay. She created a legal protection around it, ensuring it would never be disturbed or destroyed. And she established the Elena Ruiz Foundation, dedicated to creating similar safe refuges in forests and remote areas across the country. Every child who runs needs a tree, she explained during the foundation's opening ceremony. A place prepared by someone who understands, who survived, who cares. 20 years after her escape, Sophia stood before an audience of 500 people at a national conference on child protection. She was 30 years old now, a respected lawyer and advocate. But she still remembered every detail of that terrible night and the days that followed. The tree that saved me was dead, she said to the audience. It had been dead for decades. Most people would see it as worthless, as nothing but rotting wood taking up space in the forest. But Elena saw potential. She saw a hollow space that could shelter a desperate child. She saw a refuge where others saw only decay. That's what we must do for the children society has written off. The orphans, the runaways, the trafficked, the forgotten. We must see their potential. We must prepare refuges for them. And we must never ever give up on them. The audience rose in a standing ovation. But Sophia's eyes were distant, looking beyond the conference hall to a forest far away, where a dead tree still stood, still sheltering, still saving. And carved into its hollow heart, among dozens of other names, a simple inscription remained. Sophia 2011. A testament to survival. A promise kept. A legacy that would never die.